Well, Oscar Piastri just took a giant leap towards the 2025 FIA World Drivers' Championship not only with a resounding win in the Dutch Grand Prix, but also on a day when his teammate Lando Norris failed to score. Put another way, to quantify the points advantage that Oscar secured in just one day, that is equivalent of him leading a McLaren 1-2, a Piastri Norris 1-2 for 3 successive races, 3 to 4 actually. So a massive advantage for him to win the race in which Lando Norris fails to finish. He drove beautifully from the pole. As I said yesterday, once you've got the pole at Zandvoort, it's not quite like Monaco because many other factors can come into play. But it is a very difficult circuit on which to overtake. But it's also a circuit that rewards the sort of consistency, head-down consistency and planning and thinking and calm approach of Oscar Piastri. Drove beautifully, and I thought it was summed up actually in the first corner. When on the grid, like most of the other runners, he was on the medium tyre. When the covers came off, they saw that Max Verstappen was on the soft. That would have sent a little bit of a shiver through, certainly through the top half of the field. Max in P3 on the grippy side of the road on the soft tyres. Oscar nonetheless made a good start from the pole, but Max had that additional traction, and it was almost as if Oscar could feel what was going on behind him, because as he went into turn 1, into Tarzan, he let the McLaren run just a little bit wide, just to make it very uncomfortable for Max should he try a move on the outside there. It was a perfect positioning of the McLaren, and in doing so, of course, he then opened up the inside completely for Lando Norris. So although Max had made a very good start on his soft tyres with that additional grip, he now had to fight Lando Norris going through turn 2 and down into the plunge towards HunzeRug. Something that Max shouldn't really have had to have done based on how well he'd got away from the line. So all of a sudden, Oscar was free and easy to go into HunzeRug exactly as he wanted to. And Max, by contrast, was having to go side by side with Lando into the right-hand kink, turn 2, and not back off, just hope that he could get down the inside for the HunzeRug. There was a lot of sand there, a big moment for Max Verstappen. Unbelievable car control on tyres that were not even the soft tyre, not fully up to temperature, on a full load of fuel. Incredible car control of Max, first of all to catch it, and then not to overcatch it, not to overcorrect in any way, and just to keep the car going. Got it stopped in a straight line, and still managed to come out in P2 ahead of Lando, who played a bit of a circumspect game, I think, going through HunzeRug when all that was going on around him. But of course, by then, Oscar was long gone, and the race was effectively over in terms of the intra-team battle at McLaren. That bit of car control by Max, for me, I mean, it was first lap, it was opportunist, it was aggressive, it was wanting to take the race to McLaren, even though he had an inferior car. It was all the things you come to expect of Max, and to some extent Red Bull. But that specific bit of car control was very similar, I thought, to Max at the restart of the Spanish Grand Prix late in the race when they had him out on mediums. They weren't up to temperature, and coming out of that last corner when the safety car came in, he had a massive moment. And again, not only held it, but failed to overcorrect in any dimension. And that's the hallmark, I think, of just sheer class. Incredible bit of driving by Max there. Anyway, getting back to Oscar, after that, it was just a question of controlling the restarts. There were 2 safety car restarts, and doing a very good job when there was pressure from Lando Norris. Lando would sometimes get within a second of him, but Oscar drove well within the potential of the car, the potential of the tyres, no mistakes whatsoever. Capitalising, I think, a little bit on what I was talking about yesterday and how good he was through turn 9. That was not a place where Lando could really do much about Oscar and gain a lot of ground. And that's, if you had to mark an improvement point for Oscar 2024 compared to 2025, it would definitely be, in my opinion, it would be what he was doing through turn 9. And the approach to turn 9, which is the tightening radius right-hander, really, really good through there. Otherwise, he was always going to be brilliant on the medium and high-speed corners, on the banking, everything else. He was just superb and very cool as well. Always fun watching him as he gets out of the car. He's completely relaxed. Pulse rate seems to be about 65. And there he is being interviewed by Guido van der Garde, saying, oh, well, difficult to follow Isack's act on that one. I mean, come on, Oscar. He just won his 7th Grand Prix of the year, and very, very impressive drive too. Lando Norris, for his part, drove very well, I thought. I mean, it was always going to be very, very difficult after losing the pole, as we said yesterday. And he didn't, and sure enough, he was beaten into the first corner as described by Max, but then he didn't let it get away from him. And as soon as Max's soft tyres began to lose their edge about lap 6, lap 7, Lando was right on him, and then actually to pay him back for what happened on the first corner, because he was able to pass him out of Tarzan and have the inside run into HunzeRug, and then he was gone as well. So very unfortunate end to the race for Lando Norris. Very unusual to have a retirement at McLaren. It was an oil leak, there was smoke in the cockpit, there was a bit of fire right at the end of the race, and Lando out of the car at, interestingly, turn 9, the corner where he's always been so good. Had to sit on the bank and watch the closing laps. Obviously devastated, not good ever when you have been running that near the front and then you have that sort of retirement. The only thing you could say was it's a good job he wasn't actually leading from the pole and then had that problem and then given the win to Oscar Piastri. I suppose if you're going to have that sort of issue, better to have it when you're in P2 rather than leading the race. It's about the only positive thing you could say about Lando's day-to-day. That, and I think his demeanour, just amazing. I mean, I was thinking, how would Nigel Mansell react? How would Nigel have reacted in that situation? And I'm sure there would have been a bit of helmet throwing and quite a lot of foot stamping, but not with Lando. Yeah, head in the hands for a while, but very calm as well. And that demeanour is something that he will now take forward, I think, into the remaining races of 2025. The team will appreciate that, how well he reacted to that and how well he handled it. You know that was nothing to do with him. It was a team issue. It was an engine issue. It was an installation issue probably, but I thought Lando handled it really well. So Max P2, an unexpected P2 there. There was a restart in which he aggressively again was, well, not so much he was aggressively on the soft tyre at the end. It was just that McLaren conservatively put both their runners on the hard tyre. And I think more than anything else today, that highlighted how quick that 2025 McLaren is on the hard tyre, admittedly now with the fuel load light. On the hard tyre with 10, 12 laps to go, they disappeared into the distance with all their key opposition on the soft tyre. And they need to take no risk whatsoever. The advantage they have is incredible. So first of all, hats off again to McLaren and the job they've done, particularly aerodynamically. Pete Prod and the team there. But also, should we be using the word disgraceful? Performance from all the aero teams, all the other leading teams in Formula One, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. What are they doing? How could they have allowed McLaren to have such an advantage aerodynamically? And it is aero, it's downforce. And yet you've got these three major teams with massive funding, incredible facilities, lots of experience you would imagine, and yet none of them anywhere near McLaren when it comes to generating aero downforce. And I think McLaren's advantage as much shows up the quality of their work as it does the poor quality of the three teams behind them. And for that, I think that you can underline that by saying, and look how good the Racing Bull is now. It's not the fastest car in Formula One by any means, but you got to argue it's at least as good as a Red Bull, if not better now. And that was highlighted by the P3 of Isack Hadjar. Not to detract from his job as a driver. He did an amazing job yesterday, as I said, to qualify fourth. And again, massively to show up Liam Lawson. And looking very much, as I said yesterday, like a Max Verstappen clone in the way he drives. And he did all that today. Always there worrying Max. Max was never able to relax in terms of what Isack Hadjar was doing in the Racing Bull behind him. And when Lando stopped, P3 went to Isack Hadjar. Absolutely superb drive. But again, underlining the poor performance of Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari, that a team like Racing Bull can emerge from what was last year the midfield, maybe the back of the midfield, and to do such a good job with that car. It shows that there is progress there to be made if you use it well. And all credit to Alan Permain, to Jonathan Eddles, to everybody behind that team and how well they're doing now. It's just all about, to me, it's always been about managing people very well, and that's what you see at Racing Bulls, no question about it. Mercedes eventually finished fourth with George Russell. George got muscled out by Charles Leclerc in the opening lap and was then frustrated to be behind Leclerc. Leclerc could do nothing about Isack Hadjar. And when there was a restart after Lewis Hamilton had gone off, the first of the two Ferraris, both went off at the same corner, different reasons. Lewis, going reasonably well, was at the back of that group, going quite quickly, but couldn't do much. Charles Leclerc had just come in for tyres, and Lewis was due in the following lap and lost it with slight rain going into HunzeRug. Slight rain, he ran wide and then clipped the guardrail coming out. He was okay, no wrist damage, but the car was quite badly damaged. Anyway, at the restart, Charles Leclerc effectively caught George napping a little bit going into the second chicane, the last chicane of the lap, and placed himself on the outside going into the right-hander, which meant that he was on the inside for the left-hander. And if you freeze frame it, you can see that as Charles is alongside George, he's got not obviously the left rear is way off in the boonies in the gravel, but his right front is also off on the outside of the white line. So he's actually got all four wheels off the track. But he hits George, and George gets damage, and he goes past and pulls away from George. Now, they said they were going to investigate that after the race. It'll be interesting to see whether they do, because Charles Leclerc's race ended later on when he came in for soft tyres the lap after Kimi Antonelli had done so. Responding to Antonelli's pit stop, they were quite close to one another at that point. Mercedes had let Antonelli past George after that damage. And the two of them collided at HunzeRug, bringing out a second safety car. Now, there are two things there. One, I think that was entirely Antonelli's fault because he was way down the inside of this banked HunzeRug corner. Charles was doing exactly what you always do there and run around the outside. And there's nothing wrong with going down the inside there, but what you can't then do is run up to the top of it and take out the guy on your outside, which is exactly what Antonelli did, and he got a penalty for it. But more significantly, I question why Ferrari had to cover Antonelli with Charles Leclerc coming into the pits like that. Surely, it's Antonelli in the Mercedes. This is Charles Leclerc getting track position. Surely you would keep him out for another couple of laps just to get track positions consolidated for Charles Leclerc and not have to worry about covering Kimi Antonelli. I was astounded that, again, Ferrari did that. To me, that looked like, oh yeah, he's come in, we better cover the pit stop, don't want the undercut, all that stuff that they always talk about. And again, lack of free thinking, because you don't have to go down that path of the undercut all the time. You have to look at the drivers involved. And for me, anyway, if I'd been running Ferrari at that point, I would have kept Leclerc out for a couple of laps for sure. Anyway, they didn't, and it ended in tears. And at that point, I guess George Russell would have thought, well, at least there's a bit of justice there because my teammate's now taken out Charles. And that enabled George to finish fourth, albeit with a damaged Mercedes. Not a great day for them, obviously. But Alex Albon, very good in the Williams, kept out of trouble most of the time. He alone was on a new set of softs right at the end of the race, consolidated P5 for Williams, but his teammate Carlos Sainz, I think very unfortunate. I mean, every time he gets involved in an incident with another car in which there's potentially going to be some sort of penalty, it always comes down against Carlos Sainz. We've seen that basically since the Australian Grand Prix a couple of years ago, that restart. And so it was today. I can't believe that he got the penalty and Liam Lawson, who basically drove into him, didn't. And nor could Carlos. And as I speak, he's probably with the stewards now asking why they made that decision. But he got the penalty. And although he did drive very well, of course, that was the end of his day as well in the other Williams. Oliver Behrman, P6, very good. Starting from the pit lane, and finished sixth on a two-stop strategy when everybody else went three-stop. Basically, the winning strategy was medium, hard, unless you were Max Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda in the other Red Bull, and you're starting soft, medium, going back to soft, because you have to be aggressive, you've got to give it a go. But again, Haas showing how good they are at thinking laterally when it comes to tyre strategy, both Esteban Ocon and Oliver Behrman running over 50 laps on their first stint on hard tyres. And as a result of the safety cars that came in back end of the race, Oliver Behrman was able to finish sixth. Very good. Got track position from the pit lane. So an excellent drive by Oliver. Aston Martin 7th and 8th. Disappointing given how quick they proved to be on Friday at Zandvoort. They tried a short middle stint for Fernando Alonso. Didn't really work. He's in so much traffic. So in the end, it was Lance Stroll who finished 7th and Fernando 8th. Very frustrating day for Fernando yet again in terms of strategy and getting the best from that car. Yuki Tsunoda almost unnoticed in 9th place in the other Red Bull. Must be wondering how long it'll be now before he's replaced by Isack Hadjar. And Esteban Ocon, as I say, on that one-stop strategy, finished 10th in the other Haas Ferrari. So a huge crowd there to enjoy the race today. Delighted, of course, that Max finished in the middle of the podium. There was a little bit of rain finally, but Zandvoort, for the most part, dry on all 3 days, despite all those forecasts. And that was either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you were looking at the race. As it turned out, it was a dramatic enough race. We probably didn't need the rain. And there was a little bit, and I'm sure it was involved in Lewis Hamilton's shunt. Interestingly, Mercedes were telling Kimi Antonelli that they felt the rain would hit turn 4, which is HunzeRug, first, and they were absolutely spot on. And Lando Norris actually gave his race engineer a bit of a hard time after the Hamilton shunt by asking what had happened with Lewis, and they explained that he'd run a bit wide and got up onto the edge of the top of the corner and then hit the guardrail coming out. And Lando said, yeah, absolutely, that's what I thought. But that's good information that I would have needed straight away. That's race-defining information is what he said. And he's quite right to have said that. But whether or not the info got through to Ferrari, that was where the rain was going to come first, and through to Lewis Hamilton, it appears as if they didn't. And Lewis ran wide, uncharacteristically wide in the middle of the corner, just right up. And once you were there, he was a passenger and just caught the guardrail coming out. So Lewis, having had a relatively good weekend and qualifying within 100th or so of Charles Leclerc, then had it all collapse around him in the race. So it'll be interesting to see how he picks himself up going into Monza. There'll be a massive amount of attention on him, obviously, going into the Italian Grand Prix this weekend. And that probably will be a lot for him. It'll be similar to being at Silverstone almost, I guess. Although the expectations will be slightly different. But it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to that and how they pan out this coming weekend at Monza. I spoke yesterday of the RAC watch, which commemorates Ayrton Senna's 1986 season with the Lotus 98T Renault, chassis number 4. Parts of that car in the DNA of the special edition RAC Ayrton Senna watch. And we've been talking a lot about Ayrton and his role in motorsport and how he was as a racing driver. I thought today I would just show you one of my favourite pictures of Ayrton. I took this at Thruxton in 1983, just before the final of the British Formula 3 Championship, which he won. And he's there in what appears to be a deserted pit lane, because he was watching a support race. I think it was some sort of sports car race, minor sports car race. And with Paul Taft, who is the gentleman on the left, very fast racing driver in his own right, Paul, really nice guy, one of the fastest mini drivers I ever came across. And Ayrton was watching the start procedure, just because he always did that, just to watch how it worked, if there was any sort of pattern to how long the lights stayed red before they went out. Always looked at those tiny details. And he was doing that. And Paul Taft was actually doing the same thing. And they started chatting about it and exchanging information, because Paul had been watching quite a lot of the starts as well. And I just stood there taking the picture, and they both just sort of smiled at the camera as I did. And that, to me, that just shows Ayrton's attention to detail, that very early stage in his career. But anyway, it is the JPS Lotus 98T that we're celebrating with this amazing RAC watch. So details of how you can pre-order that limited edition watch in the description below this video. Big thanks to RAC Watches, to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and to Track Ninja for their support of this channel. Thank you for watching. See you again soon. Thank you.